the most famous paintings of Edgar Degas. In this video, we will see the most famous works of Degas, the most famous French artist of the Impressionism movement in all of art history. The Dance Class. Artwork by Edgar Degas from the year 1874. In that historic year of the first Impressionist exhibition, Degas produced this work in which he rules over all learned academic norms and directly copies the compositional guidelines of the most modern and exciting thing that could be seen at that time, Japanese prints. Like the Japanese ukiyo-e masters, Degas raises the point of view a little, and in this way the painter achieves exaggerated and expressive foreshortenings. In addition, Degas is given to cutting whoever gets in front of him along the edges, as would happen in a photograph. And as in one of those wonderful engravings that came to Europe from the East thanks to the Universal Exhibitions, the artist builds this painting by means of a pronounced diagonal, from the lower left to the upper right. With this, the Impressionist in love with ballet transmits dynamism and fleetingness to us, like an instant frozen in time of people moving in a harmonious, spontaneous and somewhat anodyne way, like in a moment of brief rest after the strenuous rehearsal that is imposing the demanding dancing teacher. Those of you who have passed through the spectacular Orsay Museum in Paris will see that this painting has a twin and both are very similar. Melancholy. Artwork by Edgar Degas from the year 1869. A melancholic picture, without a doubt. A very small canvas, barely the size of a page, but full of expressiveness and emotion that perhaps can only be transmitted in small doses. The emotion leaves the canvas, it is felt. A feeling, of course, melancholic. The woman in the painting is suffering, and it shows. It seems that her stomach hurts, because her hands grab her on the arm of the chair, and her face says it all, her eyes closed, her mouth half open. The rest of the painting is half finished, especially in that diffuse background, but that gives enough clues to locate us in the room, tinted with a dark reddish chromatism according to the title of the painting. A melancholic diagonal divides the canvas into two parts, one bright and the other darker, two sectors that help complement the spectacular lighting that only an impressionist like Degas could achieve. The light is perhaps the most beautiful thing in the painting, and it conveys that bittersweet feeling of melancholy, the division between the darkest sorrow and the light of hope that is always there. As the writer Victor Hugo said, melancholy is the happiness of being sad. Singer with a Glove. Artwork by Edgar Degas from the year 1878. Do you know some concert photographs? Well, here Degas seems to be doing one of those photographs, but with paint. The artist, who loved live shows so much, shows a close-up of a singer while she is performing, and captures the exact moment, the immediacy, the atmosphere. We can even almost hear a musical note coming out of her wide-open mouth. The gesture of the singer is wonderful. That hand expresses more music than the entire discography of many singers. And more if Degas places the point of view as if we were one of the spectators of the show. The lighting also comes from below, from a low angle, giving the music greater expressiveness by creating strange shadows, as the photographers well knew, and shortly after the cinematographers, who were about to be born. Also look at the framing, and tell me if the artist was not influenced by photography. In painting, it was not usual to mutilate bodies like this, but Degas thought it best to amputate the singer's left arm, perhaps so that the right one would take all the attention. The artist also plays with another very photographic concept, depth of field. We don't really know how far away that background is because Degas plays at blurring and defining the contours. Miss Lala at the Cirque Fernando. Artwork by Edgar Degas from the year 1879. Miss Lala was the star acrobat of the Cirque Fernando, a venue in Montmartre attended by almost all the artists of the late 19th century. Very strong, this magnificent mulatto managed to hold on to the rope with her teeth, and it swung to the top of the room. Among his most notorious numbers was that of clinging with his teeth to a chain at the end of which a cannon was placed that was fired. Degas was a regular at the Circus. And as we know, he didn't like to paint exteriors like a normal impressionist, so interiors like this one were his thing, and he made many sketches of these shows. The framing is truly unusual, off-center, photographic, but precisely that low angle gives us the feeling of vertigo, that Miss Lala is risking her life. Two dancers in yellow and pink. Artwork by Edgar Degas from the year 1898. Edgar Degas was a French Impressionist painter who, thanks to the privilege of being born into a wealthy family, was able to dedicate himself entirely to painting, without the need to sell his paintings in order to survive. The Parisian artist alternately approached oil painting, drawing, engraving, and sculpture. Having dedicated and given so much value to drawing is something that differentiated and stood out from his Impressionist colleagues, who resolved this directly in painting. Degas said that drawing is not what you see, but what you must do so that other people can see. He was a subscriber to the opera, an interest that began around 1870. This allowed him to watch the rehearsals and be more or less close to the dancers. This gave him the possibility of having a direct observation of the moment, from an almost privileged position. It featured dancers in every conceivable situation, alone or in groups, taking classes, about to go on stage, dancing on stage, waving or lounging backstage. This work has everything that should be in a Degas: dancers, lines, dots, pastel colors, textures, and changes in anatomy. The fact that the name of the colors appears in the work can even be considered poetic. In this painting, he portrays two young dancers in what seems to be a moment of rest after the performance. They look exhausted, rubbing their tired ankles, resting their heads on their shoulders. Around 1880, when his eyesight began to weaken, he turned to the use of pastel, which allowed him to accentuate the tense relationship between color and line, and thus achieved greater fluidity in the line. He managed to merge the color and the drawing, applying the pastel with strong vertical touches, which made the tonality stand out through the contrast of colors. Degas had a special taste for colors; they are the main engine of the work. Color allowed Degas to make variations of the same scene. The colors blurred with each other in this painting managed to create a poorly defined figure. The light of the painting enters from the left, highlighting the dancers and the garish colors of their dresses, leaving aside everything that is behind them. His brushstrokes write and describe at the same time; they are free, open. He composes with the stain, and solves with lines. Interior. Artwork by Edgar Degas from the year 1869. Edgar Degas returns to Paris after a more or less long stay in the United States, once again arouses the curiosity of his closest friends. At that time, costumbrista painting had seen its rebirth; preciousness and the prevalence of meticulous detail seemed to once again find their epitome among the preferences of late 19th century artists, and this painting does not fall short of these standards. It shows an intimate scene, within four walls, where two opposite characters are shown: a woman sitting with her back to the left side, and a man standing at the door on the other side. However, there is something deeply disturbing in this domestic scene, something that imposes an imposing, aggressive nuance of contained violence that could implode at any moment. There is a certain theatricality that intimidates the viewer, keeping him frozen in the gaze of the male figure on the right. The light is subtly reflected on the character's front side, while it casts a powerful shadow on the woman's face, who is sitting at the other end of the painting. The half-bare back, however, is strongly illuminated; her dress is falling off her, like an extension of her despondent soul, while he watches her with his acid gaze and vigorous posture. I can't help but be surprised by the elegance with which Degas disguises a gender denunciation, a costumbrista painting that reflects the customs of the time, which necessarily implies a vertical relationship of the male figure towards the experience of femininity. The handling of light is assertive, and reveals a face of reality that nobody wants to show. It is raw, it is accusatory, it is a subtle but effective denunciation. The painting manifests a climate of time that one does not want to see, a contained fury that is revealed in parts, by tired breaths of an undermined minority, from within. The Absinthe Drinker. Artwork by Edgar Degas from the year 1876. At the Café de la Nouvelle, Ellen André and Marcelin Desboutins have a glass of this drink that was so fashionable at the end of the 19th century, especially among Impressionist youth. Knowing Degas, the protagonists were not sitting there when the artist painted the work, but in his studio, and also surely they posed separately. What a face they must have stayed to see the painting of their friend Degas. They look like a careless woman and a drunk. The framing is typical of Degas, as in a photograph, with the figures off-center and decompleted to show the corner of a marble table in the foreground. And there is also a typical effect of the Impressionists, the mirror on the wall, where we see the blurred reflection of the two protagonists, further increasing the feeling of intoxication. There is no relationship between them. They are physically together, but clearly lost in thought. It is the fault of alcohol, specifically absinthe, a drink that would end up being banned in half of Europe because it caused tremendous hallucinations. During the 1860s, absinthe had become so popular that many bars and cafes indicated that at 5 p.m. Lorvert was produced. At that time, it became the main image of the Bohemian movement. By the way, Spain is one of the countries where its consumption is still legal. The Orchestra at the Opera. Artwork by Edgar Degas from the year 1870. Those groundbreaking frames can only be influenced by photography, a miraculous device that was all the rage at the time and that Degas clearly used for his pictorial process. In this painting, we are in the front row of the Paris Opera. We can almost play the orchestra crammed into the pit. Degas highlights as the protagonist of the group of musicians his bassoonist friend Désir Daiha, located in the center of the composition. In the background, some dancers are that do not come out completely from the frame. And that if there was something Degas liked to paint, it was the dancers. Unlike the other Impressionists, Degas hated painting outdoors. He was a workshop painter, and according to what they say, his workshop was in real chaos, but even so, the painter did not let anyone touch anything. One day a friend went to visit him and accidentally dropped a tiny piece of paper. Degas ran to pick it up and said, offended to his friend, "I don't like disorder." That was all for today's video. Tell us what you thought, and if you liked it, please give us your subscription and your like. This way you support the art community on YouTube. Until the next video, have a nice day.